Okay, this morning we're going to be teaching you how to model R2D2 in 3D Studio Max. So the first thing we have to do is we have to take the reference material and we're going to have to put it in the screens so we could use it to model R2D2. So we're going to go ahead and select to the front window. We're going to go grab a plane, and to make sure that it snaps to the grid and it's the proper size, I'm going to hit S for snap and turn it right here to 2.5. S for snap. Take a plane, create it, and we don't need lymph parameters for it, so I'm going to go ahead and take it to 1 and take it to 1 as well. So now we just have a plane, and I will convert it to an editable poly. So go down here to orbit subobject, rotate, and I want to zoom in and look at it, so we'll hit Z. And now we want to go ahead and apply the material to it. So we'll go up, find the material editor, which is, the shortcut is M, click on it, and it's going to bring up the slate material editor. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down and just go ahead and find a standard material right here under scan line, drop it into the editor, and then I'm going to be looking for diffuse color. I'm going to click on diffuse color, double click it, and right here under diffuse you're going to have a little box. This is where you're going to go ahead and select your bitmap. Click on there, click on bitmap, and then you find your pictures of R2D2. So in this case it's going to be front, and I'm going to go up here, where are you, right there, to assign material to selection. As you can see, the material's changed on the box, but I want to be able to display the material on the plane itself, so I will click on show shaded material in viewport, and as you can see now we have R2D2, but I want to see it from every perspective, so I will go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and turn that to two-sided. And now we have the front, and then we want to go ahead and center the plane so it's lined up to 0. So if we go right here to down here to transform type in, set to 10, go ahead and right click, and now it's set to 0. So the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and make a copy of this so I can have a side view of R2D2. So I go to rotate, and if I hit space, that locks my selection so I can move my plane without losing selection of it. And then while holding shift, no, before I do that, I want to go ahead and snap to the right angle. So the angle snap tool is A right here. Click on that, and if I hold shift now, make a copy of it, copy. Now I have a plane that we're going to use for the side view. So I'm going to take that plane, turn off snap so it doesn't go flying off somewhere else, S, and with the cursor right here, I'm going to take it and move it to the side, and then again I'm going to go to the material editor by clicking M, or this button right here, and I'm going to make a material so it uses for the side view. So again, I'm going to take standard, I'm going to drop one more material here, I'm going to go in diffuse color, double click, find the diffuse, the box, click there, I'm going to go to bitmap, and then I'm going to find the side view. So I'm going to want to apply it, so I'm going to go up here and assign material selection. I'm going to make the material so it's viewable, so show shaded material in viewport right there. And then I'm going to go ahead and make it two-sided so I can see it. And then I will close the material editor. So now we want to go ahead and move all the planes so they're in places so you won't get in your way of your modeling. So I'm going to take it, put it a little bit to the side here so you can see it on the left viewport. And I'm going to take the front one right here and move it a little bit back here. And then I will hit F3 in the front so you can see R2D2. The first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and make sure that this is aligned up to the right point. So let's go ahead and take both of these, Control to select both, and we're going to drag it right here so his little feet are touching with, more or less touching the floor. I'm going to go down here, expand my view, and I am just going to select him and make sure that his head is aligned up to the 0 on the grid point. So I will move this a little bit closer here so it's a little bit his head is a little closer to the grid point 0. And I am going to do the same for the left view. So if when I go on left, if I click F3, I can see it shaded. I'm going to go ahead and expand. I'm going to take his little head and move it right to the center. So now, when I look back, both his head and the side references are lined up. So to start off, you're going to go with the simplest thing to build, and that's going to go and be his head. So I'm going to take a sphere, go to the top view, I'm going to click on snap, so it snaps to the grid, and take and make a sphere. So as you can see, the sphere is on the other side of the plane, so I actually have to move this plane right here so you can actually see the reference material. But before that, I'll press S to turn off snap, take and drag it, and I'll go ahead and drag it behind so you can now see what you're working with. So the first thing I'm going to do is so you can see what needs to be deleted, and you can adjust the head size according to the one in the reference. I'm going to move it up, and I'm going to create a material that's see-through that we're going to use for everything so we can see under through the reference material. So I'm going to press M for the material editor. I'm going to use the mouse wheel and zoom out, and I'm going to take one more material, drag it in. It's good that it's gray. Double click it so it's selected. You'll see the little dotted lines if it is. Now go ahead and I will assign to material selection, and now as you can see, it's seeable in the screen. So the next part I'm going to do is I'm going to go right here in the opacity options. I'm going to take the opacity and I'm going to lower it down so we can see what we are working for. So if you hit F4, you can see how it's going to look on edged faces mode. So the first thing we're going to do is going to lower the poly count, because right now it's much too much. So I'm going to go to modify, sphere, and we're going to go ahead and turn this to 18, which is a more respectable amount for a low poly model. And then after that, take the sphere, right click it, and convert it to an editable poly so we have all the modeling tools. So the first thing we're going to do is delete all the parts we don't want. So if we go to polygon mode, or under shortcut, it's going to be 4. Expand it, and then you click on here. Normally the shortcut is 4. And then I'm going to go ahead and select the bottom vertices, and I'm going to delete them. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and take the R2D2 head, and I'm going to lower it down. And then I want to go ahead and take the pivot point, this right here, and move it right here so I can scale it, and it lines up more or less where I want to. So if I go to hierarchy, I'm going to do effect pivot only, and I'm going to drag it down. But before you go forward, make sure you go to File, Save As. You find a location, and you save it as R2D2. And make sure to save your file, because you always have to save it. So now that I did, I'm going to go ahead, go back to my front screen, expand my view, and then I'm going to go up here, which is the uniform, and select in uniform scale. Click that, and to lock my selection so it doesn't run away from me, I'm going to hit space. And when you see that, there's a little tool right here that means that this is locked. It's going nowhere, as you can see. Control Z to undo, and then I'm going to go back and scale it to the correct proportion. I'm going to go slowly rotate it like this. But as you can see, it's not quite perfect, so we're going to have to make some adjustments to the mesh. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take some of these vertices, and we're going to move them up with a model, starting with the ones that don't line up. So unlock my selection. You go and select by dragging the vertices, and then you move up the first ring. And right now we're going to want to go ahead and focus on making this one a little bit larger. So take that, scale it a little bit bigger. We take the next row a little bit bigger so it more or less lines up. And the last two, scale them again so they kind of line up more or less. And then I bring it upwards so it lines up with the top of it. And make sure this one right here is, there you go, a little closer. So now we have more or less a 3D version of R2D2's head, but it's not quite exactly precise. So we're going to take some of these rows right here. We're going to lower it down so it lines up with this point. And this row right here, we're going to have to go and cut that and scale it so it's a bit bigger. So to cut it, we're going to go to Edge, and you select all of these, and then hit Control Shift E, and as you can see, that split the edges in half. And then you go to Scale, space to lock your selection, and then you scale it a tiny bit so it more matches with R2D2's head. So as you can see now, R2D2's head is created. I'm going to make sure it lines up also on the left viewport, which it is slightly a bit off. So we go ahead and take the source material. As you can see, again, I put it on the wrong side. I slide it to the correct one so I can see what I'm doing. Good. And then I go to the plane that we're using for source, and then we line it up so it more or less lines up with the head right there. Perfect. So now that we do that, the next part is we're going to create is the body. So I'm going to click off there. I'm going to go in the top view, expand that, and I am going to go to create cylinder, set 18, which we needed, and go ahead and turn those to 5 because we don't need that many tries. I'm going to take the snap button, 2.5, or S, the shortcut to make sure it snaps to the top, and then I create it, and a little bit of the height. So first thing we're going to want to do is, as you can see here, it has no height. So you take the height and then you raise it. Click on it, the move tool, and hit S to take off snap. I'm going to move it right around to the bottom of what R2D2's body is, right there. And then we're going to go back to modify and take the height and raise it up more or less to where it lines up with R2D2's body. Then you take the object, convert it, right click, convert it to an editable poly, click on the vertex mode, take these last ones right here, and you're going to raise them so they more or less line up with the head, and save, Control S. So now we want to go take the body and apply the same material as R2D2, so we're going to hit M for the material shader, click on the mesh, make sure it's selected, make sure that the right material is selected, the gray one, and then you go up here, assign material selection, and now as you can see, our little R2D2 has a body. So the next part we're going to do with R2D2 is we're going to go ahead and take this bottom part here, and we are going to align, we're going to go ahead and cut the bottom so we can go ahead and extrude the bottom from and make this little section right here. So I'm going to go to the bottom. If you hit F3, you can see the mesh, and then F4 so it's shaded. So we take your editable poly, take your polygon, click at this one at the bottom, and then you click on it and you hit delete. So now we're going to go ahead and do the extrusion part. So we go right here to border, which selects all of the edges that are in this open area. And if you hold shift, first you lock your selection, and if you drag your mouse while you hold shift, you can see it's going to do an extrusion, which is what you're going to use for the base. And then after the extrusion is done, we're going to go see if it's enough, the right size for this, which it more or less is. We're not shooting for perfection, so you just hold shift while dragging down the y-axis to lower it. And then if you go here to non-uniform scale, or to uniform scale, your selection is still locked. You're going to take it and you're going to scale it so it goes more or less with the shape of R2D2. So the next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and close this bottom part, which is open when we did for the extrusion. So we go to border. If you see this option right here, hit cap. That's going to make a top for it, as you can see. So we are going to go ahead and go M so you can see it. And take the opacity out. And as you can see now, hit F4 to see take off the wireframe on it. As you can see, the mesh looks a little rough. So we need to take this shade in and make it a little different so it doesn't look faceted like this. So we're going to go to polygon. We're going to go down and we're going to scroll all of these. And then we are going to go right here, scroll down on the editable poly menu, scroll way down, and you see these smoothing groups right here. That is what affects the shading on an object. So we're going to go ahead and take a random one and hit 4, apply that. So when you click off now the whole thing is much more smooth. So the next part is, as you can see right there and right there, we're going to have to do these front extrusions that R2D2's model has. And we're going to go ahead and make those two front extrusions right there, right there. So we're going to go under the model, and then we're going to get editable poly and go to polygon mode. And then we have to make sure that the two front extrusions are the ones we're going to be working with. So let's see if that's the case. So it looks like we're probably going to have to choose 3 of these and then extrude it and then collapse it. So we're going to go and make sure we have the right ones selected that make up the front and the back of the model. So it's these 3, 1, 2, 3, control and control to make the selection. And then you're going to go right here to the extrude menu, right down here, click on that. And then we're going to want to extrude this more or less to where it is. And then after it's extruded, you unclick it. And then you take these 2 right here and then you line them up so it more or less corresponds to the mesh. So the next part is now we're going to want to delete these intermesh, these areas right here, because they don't affect our mesh. So we're going to expand our perspective view. I'm going to click on select and we're going to click these same 3 meshes, as you can see. And then you're going to hit delete. And then you're going to hit these 3 meshes right here. And then you are going to delete. So you make sure to look around. You didn't delete anything on accident that you didn't want to. However, I just noticed there's a slight alignment issue. So I'm going to hit Control Z, and then Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. And then I am going to go ahead and undo these extrudes, which is Control Z again. Undo the extrudes. I'm going to go to my top view and I'm going to make sure I rotate my model with angle snap toggle on at A, and I go ahead and rotate it so the shape, as you can see, lines up. So now that we have that done, we realize it's just 2 that we actually have to select. So we make sure we go to top view that we select the right ones. As you can see now it's wrong. So all you do is you hit your select tool and you hit Alt while dragging, Alt, and then Alt. So now you have the front and the back selected, and you hit Extrude. So you get to where the mesh more or less where you want it, and then you go and you move it, and then you line it up how you want it. So now that you've done that, you're going to go ahead and delete those bottom ones like we did before, because we're not going to use that. We're going to weld this section to the body so it's more correct to the mesh. So I'm going to click F4 so I can see my wireframe. Control, Control, Control click, Control click, Control click, Control click, and Control click, and I'm going to go ahead and delete. So now we're going to go ahead and take this section right here and move it and connect it to the intersection. So we're going to go to vertex mode. We're going to go take these 3 meshes, and then we're going to go to the snap menu, which is S. And to make sure that your vertices snap to each other, so this piece snaps to this, you click on right click, and you make sure your vertex is selected for snapping. So then this can be a little tricky, so you have to zoom in a little bit. And then while you hold, click on move. If you click space, it'll lock your selection so you won't lose it. And then you make sure you have this selected. And as you can see, sometimes a little bit tricky, so you have to zoom in a tiny bit. Rotate so you can focus on the vertex, and then you click on this. Well, as you can see, that is not working, so let's take a different approach. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to snap this and target weld these vertices so it connects to the right place. So you click on space so your selection is not locked, and you click off on all your vertices. And then you click down under the vertice menu. You're going to have one that's called target weld. You click on that vertice, and then you, as you can see, the line, which means it's going to weld it, and boom, now it's welded. And you're going to do the same for the other 2. Target weld, click, and then target weld, and then click. as you can see now the mesh has an extrusion and it's connected to the bottom part. So we're going to do the same again. You're going to go to vertices, target weld, click on the outside one, click on the inside one, click on the outside one, click on the inside one, click on the outside one, and click on the inside one, and now it is all welded. So it looks as it is in the model. So what we're going to do next is we're going to scale these vertices we just created, because they, as you can see, they don't quite line up like they should in the drawing. So you're going to go into the left view, you select the front ones, hold control, you select the back ones. So now you have both selected, and then you click on scale, and then you have to make sure you just go on the x-axis so it scales in the right direction right there. It's yellowed. And then when you click and start dragging, as you can see, it starts to line up, so make sure it's nice and lined up there. And then we're going to do the same in the front viewport, so it's more or less lined up. So if you go to front viewport, lock your selection by pressing space, go on the x-axis, and then scale it so it more or less will lined up to the right place. So now we have the body of R2D2 created. So the next part we're going to do is it's going to create the legs. So we're going to take R2D2's body right there, control the bottom, control click on the top, and then if you go to display right there, put height selected so our model is not in the way when we create the next section, which is going to be these little cylinders right here that is going to be the rotation pivot for the arms. So we're going to click right down here where the pivot should be in the drawing, go to create, and we're going to do a cylinder. We're going to create a brand new cylinder right there and extrude it a tiny bit. As you can see, it wasn't extruded when I did it, so I go to the right here and then extrude it ever so slightly. So now I'm going to take that cylinder, I'm going to select it, I'm going to press S to turn off snaps, and then I'm going to rotate down to the alignment, and I'm going to rotate to right where it should be aligned in relation to the body, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn up the radius. So it matches with the other R2D2, we're going to give it the same material. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click M to bring up the material editor, make sure the material is selected, and then go right up here and then apply it, or alternately, if I can still do it, no you can't. Well then you go right up here to assign material selection. As you can see now, you have that rotation, you have your cylinder you're going to use for that point. So we're going to go ahead and take that cylinder, convert it to an editable poly, and we're going to go ahead and delete the sections that we don't need, which is the caps right here, because those are not going to be visible. So you click in control, you select both of them, and then you hit delete. And then we're going to want to take that same element right here and copy it. So if you go to right here, element, normally it's 5 in this keyboard selection, you click on that, you hold space to lock your selection, and then with the x-axis selected, you hold shift and you make a copy, and then you have a clone part of mesh, and clone to element means that it's one model, clone to object means it's a separate model, but we're going to want to keep it to clone to element, and we hit OK. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and hide that because we don't need it at the moment. We'll use that later. And now we're going to go ahead and create the legs. So to create the legs, we're going to go ahead and start with a shape that's going to help us start building it. So we're going to do a cylinder, click on this point right here, take the cylinder, extrude it a little bit out, extrude it a tiny bit more on the other menu, yes. And then we're going to go ahead and take it and line it up a little bit better with the view so we have something to work with. So take it right there, and then take the height and change that so it's more or less a little bit better now. So we're going to make sure that we can cut this in half, we're going to make sure that it has cap segments. So I have vertices so I can cut it in half and keep both sides. So if you see cap segments here, I take that, raise it up to 2. And now that you can see, we have a cap section and a cut along the center of the mesh that we can use for this. So going into the left viewport, I hit F4 so I can see my mesh. I'm going to go ahead and hit editable poly, I'm going to select the whole bottom section of this, and I'm going to delete, so we have the top now, as you can see. So it's not quite perfectly aligned, so we're going to go to our material to apply the one that we use for the whole R2D2, assign material to selection, and then take the opacity and then lower it a little bit so we can see what we're working with. So as you can see, it's not quite as aligned as it should be, so we're going to take the center here and we're going to scale it a tiny bit towards that axis and lower it a little bit closer, and then with this kind of halfway here between there, and then you take the scale, select the uniform scale, you select just the Y, and then you scale it up a tiny bit. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take the bottom. We're going to go to our, take the bottom of this and extrude it downwards to create the shape. So you're going to click on move, and you go into sub-object in your mesh, and you can hit border. And when you click border, you're going to go ahead and take this, and while holding shift, you take it and you lower it and you raise it down like this. So as you can see, you have those cap sections, those vertices in the center, which really don't do anything. And we're going to go ahead and get rid of them so we don't have to optimize it at the end. So if you could go ahead and go to edge, you clicked on one of these, you click on the first one, and then you rotate to the other side and click, while holding control, click the other one, click. And then if you look right here in your edit menu, you hit loop. You hit Z to focus so you can see what you're doing. Now I selected all those loops of edges. And then while holding control, I hit backspace, and boom, now it's gone. It's been optimized now. So the next thing I want to do now is to make the next extrusion at the bottom, which is right here. And then while holding shift and the Y axis, I'm going to drag it down here where the next part of the mesh is. And then I'm going to go to scale and non-uniform scale, and I'm going to scale it on one axis so it is lined up more or less with the leg of the model. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and take it again, and I'm going to go ahead and extrude it. So while holding shift in the Y axis, I'm going to scroll it down all the way down there. So now we have a section of the leg, and we want to make sure it more or less lines up to the bottom, which for some reason it's off in the viewport, but that doesn't matter that much. So we're going to take this one right here and line it up so it's more or less correct. No, sorry. Should be lining up the front viewport so it's a little bit more correct. So that probably means we're going to have to do some adjustments on the other model at some point, but we'll get to that. So now that we have this, I'm going to go to the border, the bottom of the leg. You can see, and now when we hold select uniform scale, selecting nowhere, you lock the model, and then you hold shift to scale it. As you can see, it's doing an extrusion. And then going on both screens, first in the front, on the x-axis, you scale it so it lines up more or less. Now you go to this one, that one's good, so now it's pretty much lined up. You go to select, go to the front viewport, and while holding shift purely on the y-axis, you take and then lower it down so it more or less lines up. And then as you can see, this point doesn't line up with here, so I'm going to go press 1 to go to vertex mode. Shift it and lower it right to the right so it lines up there, and then take these bottom ones right here, raise it up. And as you can see, that's not quite correctly, so let's go ahead and take a different approach when it comes to this. We are going to go ahead and make another cut on these legs so we can have that shape like it is. So when you go to edge, select all of these, so every one of your vertices edges are connected. Control Shift E to make a cut, and then you take that cut and lower it down to an appropriate place, and then you take the side this, and then you go ahead and shift that so the leg now has the correct orientation. Cool, so now we have a leg. The next thing is we're going to do is that little cylinder element that attaches to the leg so we can have it. But before that, we're going to go ahead and extrude it down so we have something to work with R2D2. So we're going to go ahead and again go to polygon mode. As you can see, there's nothing down there, so we collect and we go border, and while holding shift, spacebar to lock it, holding shift on the y-axis, you make that extrusion so it goes all the way down there. Good, we have that, and now we're going to go ahead and make this shape right here, which is the leg. So we are again going to extrude it on all planes, so we're going to rotate so we see what we are working with. And then we're going to go to scale, hold shift, and extrude it outwards. So then if we have that, we have to make sure that these vertices are lined up to the mesh. So we take this top one right here, and then we bring it right to the side, and this one right here is more or less lined. That's good. And we take this one to the front, line it to the front here. That one's more or less. And now we're going to go ahead and make that extrusion. So again, we're going to go hit 3, or go to border, space to lock your model, and you hold shift to lower it down, and then you're going to go and press 1 to scale to affect the shape. You take this, drag it to the side so the shape is correct there, and then you go into this viewport right here and you take and drag these to the front and these to the back. So now we're going to go ahead, we're going to want to extrude it so we have that little midsection right here. So again, you choose border, and then holding shift on the y-axis, you lower down and you make another extrusion. And now we're going to want to go ahead and do this little section that sticks out where you have this cylinder right here that's part of the element. So we're going to rotate, and if you see these two vertices right here, or these two polygons, click and click these in ones, control and click on them, and then you hit extrude, and then you can see on the top view it's extruding to the proper position. You go to vertice mode to make sure you are lining it up, and then you save it. And finally, we're going to want to delete the polygons that are created when you make the extrusion so we can make the final shape at the bottom of the foot. Delete those, then you click 3 to go to border, select on the border, hold shift again, and then now you're going to go ahead and take uniform scale and scale it all the way so it more or less lines up with the feet. So for some reason their drawing doesn't quite line up, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. Well, you're not going to have people notice that. So you're going to unlock your selection. As you can see now, the border means that the bottom of this mesh is open. So you're going to go here in border and again select cap. As you can see, now it is fully closed. So we're going to want to see what we're working on next, which is going to be this cylinder section. So we go to M to go on our material, and then we're going to go ahead and lower this, raise the opacity to 100, and then we're going to build that little inner leg section. So again, we're going to use a base shape that we can work with. It's going to be a cylinder, and you're going to create it up here, good line up, and extrude it a little bit sideways so you make sure. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to move it to the back right here, and then I'm going to take it, go into modify, and then I'm going to extrude the height so it works with the height of that element of R2D2, and then I'm going to convert it to an editable poly. And then after I create it to an editable poly, I'm going to select polygon mode 4, take it like the bottom, all the complete bottom sections as you can see, and then I take extrude, zoom out so I can see what I'm doing, and then all the way down to the bottom so it lines up. So now you have that shape, but I don't want to have these inner vertices right here because that's a waste of mesh. So I'm going to go to edge, I'm going to click on one on the front, rotate, click on one in the back, control click, and then I hit loop. And as you can see by pressing Z to center your object, that now it is more or less selecting all of it, and then control backspace to delete. that's looking good. So the next part we want to do is we're going to go to the material editor by pressing M, and we are going to apply the same material as R2D2 had. F4 to see it, how it looks rendered. So that looks good to me. It's a very basic leg. It's going to be a very basic model. So we're going to go ahead and take the leg, and we want to attach this element to the leg. So while selecting the egg, you scroll down, or the leg, you hit attach, then click, and then as you can see the blue outline now means that that leg is the whole element. So now that we have that, we're going to go ahead to display, unhide all, and then as you can see now, we have R2D2 more or less done, getting there. But as you can see at the bottom, we have some smoothing group issues, shading issues with these two front polygons right here and back, so we're going to want to change that. So we're going to click on the model, go to polygon mode, click on that one, and the one in the back. And then we are going to scroll down to polygon smoothing groups and give it a random line like 6. And as you can see now, it is properly shaded like it should. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to go take R2D2's leg and clone it so we can not have to build it again. So we're gonna need to change the pivot and take the pivot from here and move it down to 0. So we're going to go and hit Effect Pivot Only. You can see now the pivot is lined up. And if you go on the X one, X-axis down here, 3989, right click on the value, and now it's centered. So then we're going to take that, and then we are going to go up here to mirror. It's going to bring you the mirror screen, keep it at X. No clone means that you just literally mirror it, so we're going to go ahead and make a copy of it. So now we have 2. So what happens normally whenever you mirror something, what it does is it takes all your polygons and sometimes it inverts it. So if it inverts it, for example, if you hit flip, you can see it's more darker, but in this case it's in the correct orientation. But you always have to, one thing you have to do is when you create a clone is you have to reset the X form, and the X form, when you reset that, that resets the scale of the object, the rotation, all the values, which is important whenever you need to get something into a game engine. So I'm going to go ahead and hit reset X form, which is under utilities, the little screw thing here, reset selected, and you can see now it flipped my vertices, which it shouldn't be, but now all the scale for this is correct. So you take that, on modify, collapse all, yes, and then while selecting element, which is the whole part, whole meshes, you collect all of them, and then you hit flip, and then now you're good. So now you have legs for R2D2 and you have a body as well, and we're going to go take that second leg and line it up a little closer to how it should. So now we have a little bit of his body, his legs. So the next thing is we're going to go ahead and create that little circular element right there, and we're going to do, so we're going to make a cylinder to the side, scale it up a little bit, but we don't need those cap segments like we did before. So we're going to take that cap segment value, we're going to take it to 1, and we have to make sure that this mesh is lined up to the leg because more or less the same size. So move it to right to the beginning of that element of the leg, and then you go, and then you hit height all the way here, well, that's where it should be. Good. Press Z again to see that it's lined up in the right place, and then you go to your material editor by pressing M, and then you're going to apply the one that for the R2D2. So now that you have that, you're going to want to go ahead and convert it to editable poly. You go to element, you space to unlock your selection, you click that element, which is 5, the shortcut, and you make a copy of it right there. And this time we're going to do clone to objects so it's separate and part of the other leg, and hit OK. So now that you did that, we're going to attach these to the leg. So you click this leg, and then you click on attach, and then you click on that cylinder, and then you click the other leg, and you hit attach, and you click to that other cylinder. So the next part we're going to want to do is some slight adjustments, because now you can see R2D2 is slightly off in one of those perspectives. So it's this one. It's not a perfect science, but you do the best you can, and you just scale it up slightly, and now you have R2D2's head all nicely completed. So we're going to want to do make that little extrusion that makes his visor right there. So go to polygon mode, and then you select those two polygons that make the visor. And we can't extrude it flat out because it's not going to quite work. So we're going to do something called a bevel, which makes a cut in the inside without affecting the overall shape. So we're going to go ahead and click M so we can see what we're working with. Go to your material and you lower the opacity so you can see through the mesh. So as you can see, it's not perfectly quite aligned, but it's mostly sticking to this area right here. Little front visor, this right there. So when you go and click bevel, you're not going to want to click the regular bevel. You're going to click the little box with the settings. Now, as you can see, it kind of does this crazy extrusion, which we don't want to do on the mesh. So we're going to take this value right here, lower it to 0, and then this one right here, lower it to 0. And then maybe you can't see it now, but it's too much. So take this right here and go in the opposite direction. So it's in the negative value, so it kind of gives you this outline and such. And as you can see, it made a cut but didn't affect the overall shape. So then you click OK. And then as you can see now, it has a shape that on the side that lines up more or less with it. So we're going to want to take these vertices and move them. So we make the extrusion, they lined up where they should be with the model. However, we don't want to affect the overall shape. So what we're going to do something is we're going to scroll down in the vertex menu, and they have something called constraints. You see this constraints right here? When it's none, it means that you can take your mesh, for example, and then take it and move it like that. However, if you put edge, it means that it sticks to the face and moves along the edge. So when I move it, it still keeps that shape on it. And then for this one, move it again, it still keeps that shape, good. And then for the top view, we're going to have to do the same. Take it and rotate a little bit to the side. Take it, rotate a little bit to the side. See, now we don't need that edge constraint. So we click back onto edge constraints, we click to none, and then we take it sideways like this, and then sideways like that, sideways on the upper one. And when it's more or less lined up, and it's not quite perfect, this drawing that I pulled from the internet, so it's good enough. So you take this, go and extrude it. It's good. And then you click on one, so you go to vertex view mode, and then you're going to go ahead and line these up more or less to how it should look. So now we're going to see how that looks. So we go ahead and press M for material editor, and we take the opacity right here, raise that to 100, and when I click on F4, it's going to show you a problem right there along where you made the bevel, which means the smoothing groups were messed up, so it doesn't shade correctly for that section. So if you go to polygon, hit F4 so you can see what you're working on. You hit Control. Well, first you click on one of the ones that's smoothing correctly, and then you scroll down the menu and see that is polygon smoothing groups, and it's number 1. So you're going to go ahead and take this, all these around. Cool. You got to take that and make it a 1. So when I unclick it and hit F4 so you can see a wireframe, as you can see now, perfectly works. And then the last part we're going to create of this, since it's a very, very simple 3D model, is we're going to create those little part of R2D2 in the front, which is like his little visor thing. So we are going to go ahead and select the whole model from the top view. We're going to go to display, hide selected, and then we're going to create that cylinder right there to make that. So take a cylinder, more or less make sure that you extrude it a tiny bit, and then you go right here to the front, more or less figure out where it's more or less lined up. You're going to take it and you're going to make it an edible poly. You're going to want to zoom in, go on polygon mode, F4 if you want to see your wireframe. You're clicking on the front. You're going to take, extrude, and extrude it slightly. And then you're going scale that. No, sorry, that's a lie. Control Z to undo. You hit on 1, select all these vertices right here, lock your selection with space, scale it down, and then go to polygon mode, go to extrude right here, and then extrude it ever so slightly so it's there. So the last thing you're going to want to do is, of course, the smoothing groups. When you do extrude, anything get messed up. So you select all these polygons right here. You go down to your menu, smoothing group menu on your mesh right here, and then you select 4 random ones so it looks okay. And then you hit M, go to your material editor again, and then again you apply that. So then after you have that section, you go ahead and you unhide everything again by going to display, unhide all, and then you make sure that this little part of R2D2 is more or less lined up with the body as it should be. Go to rotate. Make sure it's more or less lined up. And then you take it here and then you push it towards the body. As you can see now, it's kind of going inwards by that shading, so a tiny bit more up. Nope, wrong axis. Nope. So if you go to the top view and select the little yellow box, it lets you move it in a non-uniform way, so you get it closer to the alignment as it should be. Yes, that's good. And then you zoom out. You select your head. And then you scroll. Go to polygon mode, you click attach, and then you have attach. So there are other little parts of this R2D2 where I'm not modeling right now. We're keeping it simple. So if I select on the whole R2D2, if I go here, isolate mode, and then as you can see, in a small amount of time, you could have an R2D2 model that is going to work, and you can use it to make a low poly 3D model of. And then with this, you can take it, you can unwrap it, add a texture, and you have something that would work very well in games. And that is the end of our lesson today. Control S to save it. And then I'm going to end this recording. So Control and